Hello, everybody. Welcome to another episode of the Thriving Adoptees podcast. So today I'm delighted to be joined once again by just me. You've got me on my Todd, as we say in Yorkshire. And why am I doing this again? Well, yesterday the podcast went absolutely nuts. We had 500 downloads in one day. So I was figuring some things happening, and maybe I should do another one today. So here we are. I'm going to do a look at the feeling of healing, right? So I don't know, 10 years ago, I came across a book by a guy called David Hawkins, sadly no longer with us. He died 2012, I think. And he was a therapist. He was I think he was also a pastor. He had a religious role somewhere, a minister of some sort. And he came up with a scale of human consciousness. So I name checked this book quite a lot on the podcast. It's called Power versus Force by David R. Hawkins. Yes, that's right. I'll put a link to it in the show notes. And I'll put a link to the most important part, I think, of that scale of human consciousness. This is basically a categorization of our feelings, like a ladder. So it goes from 0 to 1,000. Goes from 0 to 1,000. He established this ladder through something called I've just forgotten what it was called. He used a scientific method which he describes at length in the book. And this was in the 70s, crazy. I really don't know why it didn't take off more, but there are, I think, something like 9,000 reviews of the book on Amazon, which is a great indicator that it did take off to a certain extent. So that really, because this is for the general population, that number of reviews far outstrips Nancy Verrier's primal window. So what I'm going to do is the scale goes from 0 to 1,000, and for me it's a perfect way to look at how our level of consciousness as adoptees at any point in our day, or as a general thing in our life. So zero is dead, and 1,000 is the level of consciousness of the great, what's called the great religious avatars. So I'm not a religious guy, but I'm sharing that with you in case perhaps you are. So Jesus and the Buddha and a few other people like that categorized at 1,000. I think Mother Teresa was close on that as well. So these are highly evolved people at this level of 1,000, and at the opposite end of the scale, we've got the level of 0 is dead. Okay, so I'm going to run through the ladder, and you'll see that it's and relate it to adoption and adoptees specifically, right? So, as I said, down at the bottom, we've got 0, which is dead. The next level up that David Hawkins categorizes is 20. So, and 20 is the level of shame. So, as adoptees, one of our central issues is that we don't feel good enough. We feel that there's something wrong with us. Why did our birth mothers or birth families, why did they disown us, not want us, relinquish us, whatever words that we use there. And the feeling of shame is clearly one of the most, according to this level of consciousness, this ladder. It's really tough, right? So that's why we suffer so much. And if you are parents, there's an interesting point looking at this shame thing. Why, if we banish somebody to their room, or put them on their naughty step, or make or mock them, criticize them in front of the other members of the family, then we are reinforcing, we're putting them in a place in shame. What's wrong with you? What's wrong with you? Why did you do that? If that's us parents talking to our kids, right? The next level is the 50, which is categorized by apathy. So we just don't care anymore. And as you see, there's a slightly, you can feel that there's a slight lifting. It's not quite as negative of shame as shame. This is pointless. What's the point of going on? This apathy is 50. The next one is grief at 75. Grief comes at 75. So we often talk about the grief, the what do they call it? The disenfranchised grief, I think. So we grieve for the birth mother that we've lost. Okay. Fear comes in next, and that's at 100. So I think about now my fear of rejection from my birth mother. So some of you might have heard this story, maybe 8 years ago, something like that. I was in a therapist's chair, and the therapist was asking me why I hadn't, or she asked me where I was on my search and reunion journey. And I'd probably 6 months before that, a year before that, maybe, I'd found out the name of my birth mother on one piece of paper, but I hadn't taken the search any further. So as I talked about this with the therapist, an idea popped into my head, and I froze with fear. So we talked about fight, flight, freeze, fawn. Fight, flight, freeze, and thought. I froze. I froze. I froze rigid, solid, not moving, catatonic, like in the chair, because this idea of my birth mother being outside, Patricia, being outside the therapist room, and me opening the door to her and her rejecting me once again. That's how it occurred to me. It seemed to be in the moment. So I was frozen rigid with fear, but then I flushed red with anger at I thought, I don't want this fear to debilitate me for the rest of my life. I am not prepared to live with this fear of what I deemed at the time, I guess, and in a highly emotional state, it probably wasn't as logical as this, right? But I didn't want to be rejected a second time, and that's what I was thinking, perhaps. Right? So I flushed red. I went from ice cold to red hot, and that was the level of fear. Sorry, the level of anger. Fear is 100. Right? Anger is 150. So there's more movement there, right? We've gone way past the apathy, there's no point, to this highly energized, angry angry state, and I've seen that. I've seen that anger in other parts of my life, other days of my life, but perhaps quite that I would say that's been my second most angry moment, and the first one being after I was talking about the teddy bear, and the teddy bear being from my birth mother, and she didn't love me enough to. There's lots of swearing, I won't do that, but she didn't love me enough to keep me in very angry terms, right? I'm just saying this out loud. She didn't love me enough to keep me, but she gave me this teddy bear as a consolation prize. And as I say, a few profanities. Again, another very angry moment. And then I switched, so back to the therapist chair and that incidence of anger. I then flipped. Okay, right. I'm gonna make this happen now. I'm gonna pick up my search again, and I got to a place of 200, which is courage, courage to. And as you see, there's kind of more and more forward dimensions. There's more and more urge to do stuff as we climb this level, and 200 is a critical point in David Hawkins' level of consciousness, because this is life affirming, right? This is how should I put that? Life affirming. Well, below 200, it's life detracting. It's not beneficial for us. Below 200, it's life affirming. So we're moving towards a better future, and before that level of 200, we're not. Then it shifts then from neutrality is 250. Thinking, what would that look like in terms of I guess it's a level-headed point, isn't it? So instead of being angry at being given away, for want of a better phrase, we're ambivalent. We're okay about it at 250. The next big one would come from an adoptee point of view, is 350, acceptance, right? Acceptance, and so we've accepted our lot in life. We are probably at peace with what's happened in the past, accepting. Reason comes at 400, so that would be okay. I can see the logic of this, and I got to that stage a little bit later as I looked at my adoption file and I saw the circumstances. I saw that she hadn't got my biological father had not wanted to support her, marry her, and in those days, 1967, conceived in 1966, born in 1967, there was that stigma around being a single mother. So logically, reason comes at 400, but I would say that the kind of the peak experience for me on the journey, on the reunion journey, was when I got the letter, when I read the letter in the adoption file, which was I'll read it to you. Okay. So this is a letter from my birth mother to the adoption social worker at the adoption agency. So it's on. She wrote it. Pat wrote it on the Monday after she had handed me over. Not sure what word you could say. Delivered me to. She'd taken me to the agency and saw my parents, my adopted parents, briefly. So that was the Friday, which was early early February 1967. And 3 days later, Saturday, Sunday, Monday, she wrote a letter to the social worker at the agency, Mrs. Bellis. And this is what she wrote. Dear Mrs. Bellis, thank you for everything concerning last Friday. So last Friday is the day that she relinquished me. I was going to buy a teddy bear for David. So that's me. My birth mother did give me a name, and I was David Anthony Flower before I was Simon Jonathan Benn. I was going to buy a teddy bear for David in Liverpool. That was where the adoption agency was on Friday. But because we met a lot of traffic, I didn't have time. So, logistics got in the way, unfortunately, of her buying this teddy bear. But I didn't. I thought the parents wouldn't mind if he had a little something from me, and was upset when I hadn't got him one, and I got him a teddy bear. Please, do you think it would be possible to buy him a little one for you to send on to him? I don't know. I don't know whether this is highly irregular or not, but I would like him to have a little something from me. Wow. Also, thinking that I was giving him a teddy bear and didn't do so makes me awful sad when I see teddies on display, as I did in Lewis's on the Saturday. So Lewis's is a shop, department store, like Macy's in the States, probably. Please, may I send you one to give him? Sorry to trouble you. So we can see there the low level of consciousness that my birth mother was in at the moment. If we use this, maybe there's some grief there at my loss. There's a desire for me to have something. There's shame about the situation that she's in at 20. So these are low levels, right? And as I read that letter, my 40 seconds of anger and fear towards Pat just melted away. They were washed away by the tears that flooded down my face as I read that letter, and I felt connected with Pat in that moment. And I was reading the letter maybe 48 years after she'd written it, but there was no time difference. Time had gone. I wrote that letter 48. So I read the letter 48 years after she wrote it, and probably something like 15 years after she died. So the letter was kind of her reaching out to me from the grave. So it was a very, and I felt connected with her. I felt at one with her, and the feeling of oneness is the feeling of love. When there's no separation between us and somebody else, then we are at one with them. And love is categorized at 500 on David Hawkins level of consciousness, right? So 500 is 500 is love. And as we go up from 500, there's joy at 540. The joy of reading this letter, the joy of the joy of connection with her, perhaps, and the peace that comes at 600. Being at peace. So there's this huge leaps in consciousness from shame. She didn't love me enough to keep me. She gave me that teddy bear. like what's wrong with me, shame at 20, to peace at 600, peace with her, peace with myself, love 500, love with her. So above 600 peace, the levels go to 1,000 and enlightenment, and yeah, whether any of us get there, whether I get there, I don't know. But I think it's a great way for us. It's been a great way for me to understand what the healing journey looks like, yeah, and how we move forward, how we become more comfortable in our own skins. So if you want to check this out, I'd highly recommend reading this or listening to this book, Power versus Force by David Hawkins. I'll put a link in there. Put a link in the show notes. I'll put a link to the graph so you can see this graph of ladder. And I guess the one thing I haven't mentioned so far, because I don't really know how to explain this, but if you it's a logarithmic scale, which means that the curve is very, very, very steep. So the difference between 0 and 1,000 is actually far bigger than you could draw on any piece of paper. So if the logarithmic scale, it's huge. Basically, the more we can do, the more we can do. The higher our level of consciousness, having a leap in our level of consciousness is very profoundly healing, whatever phase it's at. And this, especially when we get above that 200 zone, and that's what healing is, isn't it? It's a change of our feeling. Nobody really talks about what healing is. It's a change in our feeling. It's like, oh yeah, we all want to heal, but we don't really understand what it is. And if we don't understand what it is, then what chance have we got of putting ourselves in that place where we're going to heal? So, and it's an ongoing process. It's kind of never done, because the curve is so steep. This ladder of consciousness. So yeah, that's what we mean, isn't it? We say we have a shift in our consciousness, movement up the ladder, and we're going up and down the ladder all the time. Like it's probably like a game of snakes and ladders. We consciousness goes up and down, but we're looking at the typical level, the average level of consciousness, I guess, in ladder. So I hope you find that useful. And as always, if you want to discuss this, Simon at thrivingadoptees.com. Thanks a lot. Bye-bye.